So, Liam is here. What do you make of it? Did he say anything of any substance, economically speaking?
Not really. Both party leaders are being very, very cautious. You mentioned the next general election, Stephen. That's probably going to be in 2024. So 2023 is going to be all about framing the next general election, and both party leaders will cook out the blocks. Rishi Sunak obviously gave a speech yesterday. The Daily Star were lampooning that speech on their front page this morning with Blackadder and Baldrick saying, I've got a cunning plan, inflation down, but we don't know by when, debt down as a share of GDP, but we don't know by when. And there's some truth in that, like all good tabloid journalism. Sunak was very, very vague about what he's going to achieve and when, and many of the things he said he wants to achieve are probably going to happen anyway, like halving inflation by the end of the year. But if Sunak was vague, I'd say Keir Starmer was even vaguer. It's as if both party leaders, it's all about caution. It's not about, here's a really bold policy, here's something that we want to do that will help people have better lives, like, you know, on the housing front or energy bills. It's almost as if Starmer's saying, as long as I don't muck things up, I'm going to win this election. And I think that was very much the order of the day today. It was steady as she goes, take no risks.
I suppose he's in a problem, isn't he, being in opposition, in that he doesn't want to tie his hands too much because he's got to see what the economic situation is like when there is a general election.
He doesn't want to tie his hands. Sunak doesn't want to pledge to doing something that might not happen because then he can be beaten with a stick by the Labour Party. You don't deliver on your promises. And yet, while the politicians are playing these parlour games in Westminster, Stephen, and the media are getting all excited about it, back out there in the real world, GB News viewers and listeners are thinking, hang about, I'm really worried about my electricity bill. I'm really worried about whether my kid can buy a house or get a council house. I'm really worried about my employer because their energy bills are absolutely huge. Is there going to be a job for me? There's all these real-world concerns, and yet I think the politicians are sort of playing political footsie under the table. I thought the most important line from the Starmer speech, and indeed it was queued up by Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor, beforehand, was, we can't spend their way out of their mess. And we're not going to get the big government chequebook out
which is different from what, I mean, in the last financial crisis, I mean, that was their key argument, wasn't it? We need to spend our way out of it.
That's right, that's right. But now, because the tax burden's already at a 70-year high, the share of tax in our overall GDP, because the public knows after the debacle of the Liz Truss quasi-Kwarteng mini-budget that if we do spend too much, the bond markets freak out, that's a technical term, by the way, and then borrowing costs, mortgages, credit cards go much higher than they otherwise would be. So it's almost as if Labour want to do more than the Tories, but they don't want to spend anymore. And that's why whenever people like you or me put them in a corner, they then wheel out this, oh, we're going to end non-dom tax status. What does that mean? That means a number of rich foreign people who make their home in the UK, their taxation on their UK income is less because they're taxed on their foreign income. And Labour strategists calculate that could raise for them about £3 billion. Well,
that's nothing.
There are two problems with that. First thing is you don't know if the people who you're taking away the status from, I mean, they can just move back to Monaco or whatever. Some of them will do that. But as you say, it's a drop in the ocean. £3 billion out of, you know, 900 billion pounds of public spending a year, you know, 200 billion spent on the NHS. It is a drop in the bucket, and that's a year, and the non-dom number is over a number of years.
Yeah, but also they've got the problem, haven't they? That, I mean, they're complaining, I mean, quite rightly so, a lot would say, about the tax burden at the moment. So they can't look at putting that up. They can't look at increasing that because that would be absolutely hypocritical.
Labour actually opposed Rishi Sunak's increase, the social care levy, the rise in national insurance. So Labour actually opposed that.
So they can't go down that route. They don't want to go down the public spending cut route.
And that's why they're coming out with sort of vague platitudes. This isn't a party political point. I'm just analysing it as I see it, as I know you are and always do. We're going to come up with a new way of governing. We're going to devolve power from the centre. All kind of vague things that don't really mean anything to anybody sitting at home, knowing that the credit card bill is about to land on the mat, knowing that they've got to do their tax return if they run a small business, knowing that corporation tax is about to go up again if they run a small business. all these issues, and politicians don't seem to be grabbing the people's priorities, it seems to me. I personally think the country is up for a bit more bold and visionary leadership rather than this ultra-cautious, steady-as-she-goes politics.
What about the green energy credentials in all of that? Because whereas that satisfies an element of society, green energy, he was also talking about, cheaper energy bills for everyone forever. He's talking about using it for economic growth because of all the jobs that could be created through that. I mean, that's something which is quite bold, isn't it?
Well, what Labour are trying to do is what the Democrats try to do in the States, to align their kind of university-educated, sort of Waitrose shopping voters with their less educated but often more streetwise Aldi and Lidl shopping voters. And around the green agenda. So the people in the university towns where Labour are fighting the Lib Dems, they'll like the idea of more environmental policies, particularly because we've seen quite a lot of slippage, some people would say, during this war in Ukraine with energy bills going up and so on. And yet you can make this green agenda interesting and palatable for the Red Wall voters if you point to something like Teesside, where, of course, there's a lot of Conservative MPs at the moment and a Tory Mayor, Ben Houchen, because on Teesside, that you have carbon capture storage systems, you have all kinds of biomass projects, trying to align the green agenda with the kind of post-industrial agenda in the form of green jobs, not just on insulation and building solar panels and things like that, but carbon capture and storage schemes. If you manufacture wind turbines, we're getting a big wind turbine factory on Teesside soon, building what will be the biggest offshore wind farm in the world, a collaboration between the British and the Norwegian government at Dogger Bank there in the middle of the North Sea. That's the kind of policies that Labour will be trying to champion, where you can align the Red Wolf side of Labour with the more kind of she university-educated side of Labour. This is what Keir Starmer has to try and do, so we're going to hear a lot more about this green agenda.
It's worth talking to you, Liam, just to hear she. It's very good. It's very good.